As we approach the end of the year, and given how busy everything gets, I thought we'd take a slightly more relaxed approach over the next few weeks, as it's been nice over the past few months building up such a loving community for this channel, and I've loved debating everyone's point of view, all whilst hopefully introducing people to some new music along the way. So to see the year off, I thought we'd start off with a brief review of my favourite albums of 2022. I found 2022 a bit of a weird year for new music, to be honest. There's been a lot of new music released, but I can't say a lot of it has really been to my taste. I only just realised the majority of music I'm still listening to that I thought was from 2022 is actually from late 2021. Overall, it's kind of meant that when new albums that I liked came out this year, I'd hammer it to death on re-listens, then become a bit sick of it for a month. And whilst I found a lot of new indie music that I liked, all of their albums seemed to be due in 2023. There's also been some albums that I was highly anticipating that turned out to be flops, and there's some albums that took me by surprise, so it's been a year full of high highs and low lows. But alas, it's undeniable there were some great albums this year. So here's my list for the best albums of 2022. I'm not slating any albums that I don't mention, these are just my personal highlights from the year. And I mean, as this is the indie list, I do have a preference towards rock, indie rock, pop-style tunes and ballad-type albums. So apologies if you're a fan of grime or rap, as there's not much of that on my list and you may want to tune out now. I still appreciate those genres and listen to them, but they just don't tend to get into my favourites. Also, the albums go in chronological order throughout the year, so this isn't my ordered ranking of the albums, it's just when they came out. As always, at the end of the video, be sure to let me know what your best albums of 2022 were. Now that's all the business out the way, let's get on with it. So straight off the bat, The Weeknd started off the year by randomly dropping Dawn FM only 6 days into 2022. And to be honest, it was a welcome New Year treat for me. The album really felt like a bit of a style change up with lots of songs echoing what I'd call quite weird tastes. But I liked it. I mean, it's certainly not my favourite album of 2022, but it was one I was pretty happy to kick off the year with, so I think it was only right to pay homage to it on this list. My next favourite release of 2022 was Charli XCX Crash. Now, this might seem a bit out of nowhere, but I've always liked Charli XCX, so when Crash came out, I was pretty happy it was full of bangers. This felt like the injection of life I needed in 2022's releases earlier in the year, smashing the usual Charli XCX blasting bass and great vocals and indie pop guitars to develop some really high quality songs. If you needed a bit of life and hype, whack this album on and it'll get you going in no time. In April, Wetleg finally delivered their debut album, titled Wetleg. And this came out to the hordes of criticisms stating that the band was an industry plant or that they made NPC music, to which all criticisms seemed to fade away a little bit, as the album represented a fairly good range of tracks, demonstrating that Wetleg weren't just a one-trick pony many may have thought they were, with their single Chaise Long. I really like their debut album, and to me it's one album that particularly sticks out from 2022, mostly due to the sort of cryptic mysticism that had been surrounding Wetleg. So when they laid their album bare for all to listen, I certainly wasn't disappointed. I thought the album was great and had a great take of what you call classic Wetleg songs and highlighted some styles in their music that I hadn't heard for a while in music anywhere. And I'm excited for their follow-up album. Now, next up is Harry's House by Harry Styles. I mean, it's undeniable that Harry's House brought us some of 2022's biggest tracks, mainly through As It Was and Music for a Sushi Restaurant, alongside being an album full of what I'd consider really great tracks that tiptoe between pop music and indie music. It's also what my first video on this channel was about. It was just me rambling about the track list of Harry's House, which took about 50 seconds. And it also didn't help, I released it 6 months after the album had already been out. But as a result, I feel quite nostalgic about this album, as a reflection of the year and a reflection of how far the channel has come in only 3 to 4 months. I think at some point I should probably do a proper review of the album and give it the justice it deserves, but I certainly do think the album was one of 2022's highlights and it provided many great tracks. In June, Foals released Life Is Yours, and it's an album which I immediately fell in love with on my first listen. From the style of the guitars, to the production of the songs, and the general song progressions, it all hit a great spot for me, and highlighted some of my favourite stylistic choices. The only issue I had with this album is that at the time, a lot of the songs sounded quite similar, but I loved them, so it didn't really matter to me. It did mean, though, that after a month of its release, I was unable to listen to the album for a little while, for what felt like burnout of hearing the same song over. Thankfully, I'm past that now, though, and I'm back to loving this album. Life Is Yours is a great addition to Fall's discography, and it's certainly one of my highlights from 2022. It's also the second video I made for this channel, which I should definitely remake at some point. In September, one of my favourite indie bands returned. Sports Teams are a band that I've loved since before their actual debut, and rightly so. It's a good old-fashioned indie rock band being slammed into your ears, reminiscent of a hyperactive British version of The Strokes. Sports Team's second album, Gulp, certainly didn't disappoint me. Upon the first listen of their second album though, I didn't quite get it, but on my second listen it hit the exact right spot for me. The album clearly seems to be about the deterioration of a relationship in some form, alongside a bit of political commentary, with great songs such as Unstuck, Getting Better, The Drop, Cool It Kid, and Fingers Taken Off. If you're into any of the bands I've previously spoken about on this channel and haven't checked out Sports Team yet, definitely give this album a whirl. And while you're at it, check out their debut and some songs before that. They're a great band. Now, it's probably no surprise that Being Funny in a Foreign Language is on my list of favourite albums from 2022. I've spoken extensively about this album in several videos now, so feel free to check those out. To save everyone the pain, I'll just give a quick recap on why I love this album. It's absolutely brilliant and encapsulates a best hit style album from entirely new songs. It's certainly my favourite album of theirs and it's undoubtedly one of the best of this year. Now, if Matty Healy could stop eating raw meat on stage and kissing everybody, that would be fantastic. Now, these aren't on the main list for the year, but I thought I'd include some things that are new released but not quite new. That being the deluxe version of Inside by Bo Burnham and the live deluxe version of 17 Going Under by Sam Fender. I thought I'd include these deluxe versions of the albums as they are both new to 2022, but the main album originally released in 2021. Both albums have a few nice extra additions on the setlist, which makes for a nice bonus. They're definitely albums I love, but are realistically from last year. They're good stuff though, so if you want to revisit some great albums from last year with a few extra additions in 2022, go check these out. It's pretty standard as well that I think everyone listens to music from previous years as well as the current year we're in, because to be honest, we aren't robots. So I thought I'd chuck in a little throwback album into this list for an album that I've been listening to quite a lot this year. For me, that album is Fire by Electric Six. You might remember Electric Six for their two massive hits in the early 2000s being Danger, High Voltage and Gay Bar. The album features both of those songs alongside other groovy, hard-hitting, fast-paced guitar-busting tracks, hitting you straight from the opening track in Dance Commander. Electric Six really made a banging album with Fire, and it's one that really sits at the top of its genre for rock slash sort of synth music that's meant to be edged with comedy but is actually incredibly well done, mainly represented by bands such as Tenacious D or nowadays people like Bo Burnham. The main song I love from this album though is Synthesizer, which comes across as quite a sincere and a bit more of a tame song compared to the rest of the album, and it sees the album off to its end as its final song. It's all about stating you can do whatever you want in life. You can be mean, you can be kind, you can be happy or cruel, you can be the most healthy or talented person, but you'll never be able to ignore music, or more specifically, Electric Six's techno. It's a great tune to finish a great album. Be sure to give it a listen if you haven't before. As next year, it's its 20th birthday, so if you listen to it now, you can pretend to be edgy and say you heard it before then. Now we come to the disappointment of the year. If you've seen my previous videos, you might be able to guess what my disappointment of the year was. And it's The Car by Arctic Monkeys. As previously said, Arctic Monkeys are my favourite band, and my hype around this album was massive. I loved Tranquility Base, so I was happy enough if Alex Turner and co were going to stick with the style change. But as each single came out, I got a bit more apprehensive, and when the whole album was out, I came to the conclusion that I was disappointed, but I was just in denial I was disappointed. The album is okay, it's not a bad album, but it's not really a good album by any means. There's a lot of flaws to the album, and a lot of the further stylistic change-ups could work in some manner, but for me it's the execution of the ideas that see it fall flat on its face. I think if you want to know my feelings a bit more in depth, feel free to check out my review of The Car back when it was initially released. Because to be honest, I haven't really changed my opinions of the album, which tends to not be a good sign of it being a slow burner, or one that I'll come round to. Again, not a bad album, but not a good one. And sadly, therefore, my favourite band were my disappointment of the year. Oh well. But I'm sure AM8 will be great, right? Right? Now, the best of the year for me probably won't come as a surprise for anyone. It's, of course, Humbug by Arctic Monkeys. Of course, I am joking. The best album of the year was Being Funny in a Foreign Language by 1975. All I could do is echo everything I've previously said about this album. It feels like a continuation and a development of the 1975, really showing off their skills as musicians for the different styles of music they can produce, all neatly packaged in a single album that shows great songwriting, great vocals, and a great performance by ultimately a great production. It's great. But I think I'll leave it at that, as Matty Healy's probably out there doing more weird stuff as we speak. Now, overall, it felt like 2022 was a pretty decent year in some patches. You got the likes of Harry Styles, Foles, sports teams, and the 1975's releases. But other than that, the landscape could feel a bit bleak at times. Not a lot blew me away, but there were enough strong albums so that the year hasn't felt disappointing either. There's a lot of albums I did really like that I didn't include on the list because I thought, yeah, they're good albums, but they're not my favourites. I think 2023 is going to be an absolutely massive year with so many popular artists returning and stating the working continuously on new projects. But I'll save that for next week's video, if you can guess what that's going to be. But overall, what were your favourite albums of the year? Do you hate any of the ones I've included with a burning passion? Let me know. Till then though, I hope you're having a lovely holiday season, and I'll see you next week for my last video of 2022. So on that note, I think I'll say ta-ra for now, and I'll see you later.